We're just days away from the beginning of a new decade, the 2020s, and as the teens and the tens come to an end, I thought I would do a retrospective video. And as I was going through all of my YouTube videos and thinking about what I wanted to include, it was really brought home to me just how much all of this that I've been doing on YouTube represents, in large respect, not just my public face, but probably the thing that I've done that has had the biggest impact, other than teaching face-to-face classes over the course of that decade. So I thought that what I would do is talk about some of the key series and things I've been doing with YouTube, and maybe you know about all of them, or maybe some of this will be new to you who are viewing it, and you'll go back and check them out if you're interested. And I thought I'd also talk about how the channel got started, and also what I've learned on the way. Although I might reserve a lot of those lessons for another video if I give it more thought, but we'll see how those emerge when I get to the end of this shooting sequence right here. So with no further ado, we begin in 2011 with the critical thinking videos, which aren't even in my channel. The very first videos that I started recording for YouTube were not actually in my channel, and you won't find them there. They are owned by Fayetteville State University, where I was teaching at the time. You can see the playlist of it from their own channel there. I also have it in mine. And there's the very first video that I had uploaded. Back then, YouTube was in its infancy, and individual users could at first only upload 10 minutes and then 15 minutes of video. My class sessions were 50 minutes long, so we would have me record them and then give them to a tech person there who would load them into Fayetteville State University's institutional channel. Now, I never thought that I would be putting any sort of content into YouTube. And the person who was really the catalyst for getting me to do that is my, at that time, fiance, now wife, Andy Shaka, who made a number of different arguments with me as I made counter arguments with her, saying things like, who's ever going to watch this stuff? I don't know if this is worth doing. I'm a nobody, all those sorts of things. She was a big early adopter, believer in educational technology, and she said, give it a try. Can't hurt. And I saw that since I was teaching 4 sections of the same class that semester, it would really be helpful for my students if they missed a class or if they wanted to go back and review it, to be able to see what we did in the first class of the day. And that's what I did. I recorded that class session. And it was very primitive. I had a flip cam. At that time, there was actually a company called Flip that the flip cams were associated with. And I would put it on a tripod and just plunk it down, and sometimes students would bump it. The sound quality was not particularly good. You can see, too, that I was shooting it. Sometimes it was a little bit lopsided. I would shoot it, with just whatever I was wearing at the time, and fortunately the lighting in the place wasn't too bad. And something really interesting happened, which is that as I uploaded these videos for my own students and then linked to them, they were out there on the World Wide Web. And within days of posting videos, other people started watching them and using them. And I started getting comments, as you can read if you go into these, saying things like, oh, this is really helpful for me because my teacher won't explain anything, or I wasn't understanding something, or this helped me write a paper, this helped me with an exam. And then other people started saying, oh, you should do more of these sorts of videos. So these are the only videos that I've done that I don't actually have, you could say, full intellectual property right access to. I'm not sure if I'll ever worry about that down the line. I'm content to leave them in there. But that was my first experimentation with what we call lecture capture. I started recording my own videos and uploading them in my personal channel with these Dr. Sadler Chalk and Talk videos that you're going to see some excerpts from right here. And same sort of deal, I would just plunk a camera down, come in and use a classroom that was available and just start talking about a particular topic that I thought people might find interesting or that they'd ask me questions about. And I called them Dr. Sadler's Chalk and Talks in part to thumb my nose at the educational experts who were telling us at the time that lecture was dead and chalk and talk was the old way of doing things, and we had to get away from that towards something that would engage the millennial learners. And this is mostly boomers telling us that. As it turned out, they didn't know what they were talking about. Which is often the case with educational experts. They were right in some respect that educational technology would make it possible for us to do so much more and reach a much wider audience. But the idea of the lecture being dead is totally wrong. The bad lecture, you could say, is as dead as it's always been, but if you can hold a crowd and you can talk to people in a way that they can understand, the lecture is incredibly powerful. And when I tried doing classes that were all active learning and no lecture, students would actually get quite upset and say, when are you going to lecture? When are you going to talk about these sorts of things? So lecturing has been an integral part of what it is that I do, not only in the classroom, but also on YouTube. And this is a way for me to use classrooms there and at Marist, and eventually with my own chalkboard at home, as you see, to reach a much wider audience and talk in these bite-sized snippets about things that I thought were worth exploring. After that last spring semester in 2011, I left Fayetteville State University, actually leaving behind early tenure and promotion and all sorts of administrative things that I was doing and interesting studies. And I did so for the sake of love, moving up to the Hudson Valley to be with my, again, at that time, fiance, and Ishaka, now wife. And I started teaching as an adjunct at Marist College, and here you see me in the classroom in, if I remember right, the main philosophy area. I'm blanking on the name of the hall right now, but I remember that classroom so well. And I taught intro to philosophy and ethics for them, and then came to teach another class that I'd taught previously at another job called Religion in America. Eventually I started teaching online for them as well. And I recorded my lectures again. They were cool with that, and they did not assert intellectual property rights over what I was doing. So I could upload my videos into YouTube. And again, I started finding the same sort of reaction, which was that people were saying, this is really interesting. I'm so glad that you uploaded this. And now people were saying something else that I found really heartening as well, which is quite a few people were saying, I can't afford to go to college, or I went to college a long time ago and I miss being in the classroom, and your videos let me feel like I'm in a college classroom with a professor who's engaging their students. So, that was really quite gratifying to hear. So I shot quite a few of those videos, and I think that's what started really attracting people to my channel, because I had consistent uploads during the semester. And I started getting a lot of requests from people to start shooting other types of content. From about 2010 to I think about 2012, I'd been on another platform called VU, which was an experimental platform that didn't unfortunately last, the way most of them don't in the world of technology. And it would allow people to ask you questions, and then you could do very short, up to 2-minute answers to them, video recording them. So when they went under, they gave us all back our content, and I started stringing together these VU shorts. I'd pick 10 of them on some particular topic and put them together, and my viewers really enjoyed that. So then I started continuing on and taking viewers' questions. and answering them in the same sort of format, sometimes going over 2 minutes. I think the longest that I ever did was a 4-minute response in those. And that was kind of cool. It was a way to engage my viewer base and allow them to get to pose questions for me. So that was a lot of fun to do. As I was shooting the Marist videos, I started getting more and more requests for thinkers and texts that I wasn't covering in my classes. And so I put it to a vote among my viewers, and they actually came up with 4 main thinkers that they wanted me to tackle. One was Jean-Paul Sartre, another one was Martin Heidegger, another one was Georg Friedrich Wilhelm Hegel, and then there was Herbert Marcuse. So I started thinking, and I said, well, you know, I haven't looked at existentialist thought for quite some time, and I really used to be into existentialism, so why don't I do a series on existentialist philosophy and literature? So that's exactly what I did. And I started with Dostoevsky and Kierkegaard and Sartre and people like that, and eventually started covering Camus and Shestov and Heidegger, Rilke, and I think the very last one that I did was on Kafka, or perhaps it was the Sartre No Exit one. And I always mean to go back to that series and start it up again. I might do that if I find myself with more time on my hands. It did prove to be very useful for me as I began teaching online classes elsewhere. I could supply these videos for the students and give them a good background in at least some of the main existentialist thinkers that I wanted to cover. I should add as well that these existentialist philosophy and literature videos are among the most viewed videos in my channel. I kind of wish they were higher quality, but that was what I was working with at the time. In 2013, I started experimenting with another kind of video. Instead of doing these very long, oftentimes hour and a half lectures, I started shooting shorter videos that I called core concept videos. They would focus on one key idea. And at first I was shooting these in the classroom, recording class sessions, and then saying, okay, that focused on this, let's break this little section out. And then I started shooting them just on their own, and I found they were incredibly helpful for my students. They have become the core of all of the online classes that I teach, whether in the Study with Sadler Academy or for academic institutions. I keep shooting more and more and more of these. They've become a major part of my repertoire. As you can see at the time that I'm creating this video, I've got 615 core concept videos from Parmenides all the way to 20th and 21st century thinkers. So you'll remember that a little while earlier I was talking about people requesting Hegel. I decided to take that seriously, and in 2014 I entered on a massive project that I didn't realize at the time would take me quite so long to bring to fruition. And that was to take Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit, one of the works considered to be most difficult in the Western philosophical canon, and to try to explain it. And I thought, well, can I do the same thing I did with the Existentialism series, where I do summaries of parts of a book, like I did, say, with Nietzsche's Genealogy of Morals? And I thought, that's not really going to work with Hegel. And I'd already done some earlier lectures in the Intro to Philosophy on parts of Hegel's work, and I thought, I want to do something a little bit more focused. So I came up with the half-hour Hegel series, a line-by-line, paragraph-by-paragraph commentary, skipping nothing in the entire text. And I thought I'd be finished with it in just a few years. I'm still working on it at the present with well over 200 videos in the series, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are now in the 600s in the 800 or so paragraph work. I came up with a new format for my videos in this half-hour Hegel series, and you can see a little bit of it here. I'm going to jump through it kind of quickly. First, I start with this master slide with me and Hegel side by side. That's a younger me, and then it's this particular first video has me explaining what I'm doing in the project itself, but most of them will then begin with a slide that shows the paragraph, and then it's side by side me reading Hegel's text, and then we cut again to another slide, and then we've got me in front of the chalkboard explaining what that particular paragraph of Hegel that I've just read to the listener is about, at least in my view. Hegel is a very difficult thinker, so of course many people might have disagreements with what I'm saying, but this is the first thing like it out there for not just this work, but really any other work, doing a very close reading line by line by line and explaining it for the watcher or listener. In 2014, I started partnering for the first time with local libraries, not to give one-off talks as I'd done in the past, but to do entire series. So my first one was this Glimpses into Existence, 11 Key Existentialist Writers, which I did at the Kingston Library in New York. And we went through 11 different figures that are really central to the existentialist movement, and it went quite well. It ended up gathering sort of a critical mass of regular attendees. I was invited back, and since I was doing a lot of work on philosophical conceptions of anger and anger management at the time, I thought it'd be cool to do a set of lectures specifically on that. You can see I began with Greek tragedy and epic poetry, and then went into Jewish scriptures, but then went into Plato and Aristotle. And we got as far as Thomas Aquinas before I ended up with my wife leaving Kingston to come here to Milwaukee. Otherwise, we had planned to have an entire 12 lecture series that year. Since coming back to our home state of Wisconsin and our hometown of Milwaukee, I started doing more of these public lectures. One of the places I was invited is the Frank Weinberg, where I, since 2016, have been doing a quarterly series called Philosophers in the Midst of History, in which I talk about philosophers, who they're engaged with, their political background, economic background, historical background, and the mark that they themselves left on history. And that's going on for another year here, and probably will be for years to come. An even bigger project has been a monthly series, which I've missed a few due to illnesses, called Worlds of Speculative Fiction. So for the last 4 years, every month I've been coming in, and we had people reading certain texts, and we talk about the narrative world created by important fantasy, science fiction, horror, alternate history, all sorts of things, utopian literature, all these interesting thinkers. And I loved going back and rereading many of these writers. And again, that one's continuing on into the present as well. And I don't think we're ever going to run out of authors to discuss. I started getting people sending me books wanting me to review them, so I started this whole new series called Sadler's Honest Book Reviews, and you're seeing a little excerpt of one right now, of The Porch and the Cross. And I would, shoot in my studio and discuss the books and do so in a very unvarnished way, saying what I thought was good and what was bad, and whether the book was worth actually having. For the most part, I've given pretty positive reviews. I have said recently that one of the books wasn't worth getting, and I have been quite critical on certain points of the books. That's another series that I'm probably going to continue on for the indefinite future because I've got quite a stack of books waiting to be reviewed. I've also been doing some live streaming. Here you see me in one of my AMAs that I was holding fairly recently, I think. Yeah, that one looks like it was in the hallway. No, not in the hallway, in the bedroom. You can see the closet behind. And what I do is I answer questions that are put to me by my viewers in the chat function. Usually those go for about an hour and a half. They're a lot of fun. And I also do pop-ups when I have the time. All of those are underwritten by my Patreon supporters. When I reached a certain level of Patreon support, I pledged that I would start doing these AMA and pop-up sessions. And I've been pretty good about getting them in each month. There you see me like showing the bookshelf off. So you get the idea of what those are like. In 2018, I started another series called Ideas That Matter, in which I would have sit-down conversations with people who I thought had something really interesting to say and contribute to. Very often these are people who I know and I have, you could say, some chemistry with, and we get into some great discussions, often veering off topic and coming back on. You see Sheila Payton here, one of our great Milwaukee local authors, and she's involved in the community quite a bit. I got to know her through the writing group that we're both involved in. And then here's another one with Chris Gill that I shot when I was in London for Stoicon 2018. And we had a great conversation about his forthcoming book about Stoicism and virtue ethics. And I'm going to start doing more of these as the new the new decade approaches. And I'm really looking forward to having more of these conversations and chats with all these very interesting people. Another series that I actually started this year is advice for lifelong learners and people engaged in self-directed study about how to approach particular thinkers or movements in philosophy. So far, I've mostly done just things in ancient and a little bit of medieval, but I intend to roll these out and expand it to include all sorts of thinkers across the wide spectrum of approaches and throughout the timeline of history. And hopefully these will be useful for people. I think I'll be rolling out some adjunct videos as well about how to successfully approach philosophical texts. I did one like that years and years ago for my students, which really needs to be updated. But that's one of the main series that I'm working on now. I try to roll out one of those each month. So that's quite a lot of YouTube content over the course of this decade, and I have no plans to quit anytime soon. I'm hoping that YouTube is going to stay around in its present format. Who knows what technology is going to look like 10 years from now. Think about the radical transformations that we've had just in the course of this decade and how many new features have been rolled out. So who knows what's going to happen. I can tell you this, I'm going to keep on doing the talk series and uploading core concept videos and half-hour Hegel videos and doing interviews and book reviews and AMAs and all these sorts of things. And I'll probably have some other things lined up as well as new ideas occur to me. So, you know, if any of this stuff interests you, you can always go back and find most of this, I think, in playlists devoted specifically to it if you've missed out on some of the things that you might want to check up on. And, you know, if you've got ideas for what you'd like to see, most of the time I'm not looking for advice from people, but if you want to leave them as comments on this, and, you know, dream big, I'll do my unusual thing, which is to say, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Can't say that I'll actually take on all those ideas because probably I won't have the available time, even if Patreon radically boosts up and I all I can do is spend time doing YouTube videos. The amount of stuff that people ask for from me can't possibly be met by one content producer, but I can get quite a bit done. I will say a few other things before I close this. I'm fortunate in that I've got a base of viewers and subscribers who really do like the content that I'm producing and share it with other people and help support the channel and the work that I'm doing. Many of the comments that I get are quite encouraging. Many of the comments that I get, like I put, are also quite heartening in that people are saying this is really helpful for me, for the classes I'm taking, for my own lifelong learning, in order to help me get through this paper, this test with this professor who won't explain anything. So that's all quite gratifying. I really enjoy the interactions that I have with viewers and subscribers through the AMAs and in discussions of content. I've gotten to be friends with quite a few of them over these last 10 years or so of YouTube content. So a lot of good things coming up, hopefully remain healthy and keep churning out the content on my chalkboard back here. So we'll see what happens in this next decade. I hope it's a healthy and prosperous one for you on your end and that you have a great new year.